One of my favorite things to do is to look at how video game box art was changed across different regions. Different people across different parts of the world have different tastes, so companies will often change the artwork on the front of the box to fit what they think the people of a particular place will like. For example, let's look at the box art for Jammer Lammy, a rhythm game released in 1999 on the PlayStation about a guitar-playing lamb named Lammy in a rock band called Milk Can. The original Japanese box art does something kind of unique in that there's actually a teardrop-shaped hole in the box art where you can actually see inside of the game's case, allowing you to see the disc of the game. In a way, you can sort of customize how the box art looks by rotating the game disc in different ways inside of the case. But even besides that, it's a neat looking case. I dig the sort of psychedelic vibe that's going on in the background, and Lammy looks rad with her guitar. I think the European box art is probably just as good as the Japanese version. You don't get the teardrop cutout, but you do get to see all of the members of Milk Can, Lammy as well as Kitty Cat and Ma-san. The North American box art is probably the weakest out of the three. You only get to see Lammy and Kitty Cat, which I just find weird. Like, I get showing just Lammy since she's the main character, but if you're gonna show their group, you have to show Ma-san too, so you get all three members. I personally don't really care for the white border they put on the top and bottom of the artwork, and while Leave It to Lammy is a cute tagline, overall I think the North American box art doesn't really have the same cool vibes that the Japanese and European versions have. Jammer Lammy is actually a spin-off of another game, Parappa the Rapper, which was released in 1996, also on the PlayStation. Instead of being about a guitar-playing lamb, you play as a rapping dog named Parappa, who's trying to impress his crush, the sunflower Sunny Funny. The original Japanese box art is filled with so much color and life. You can see most of the game's major characters. Overall, it's just fantastic. The game got a release in Europe the following year, and while I still do like it, I don't like it nearly as much as the Japanese box art. They got rid of a lot of the vibrant colors and they removed all of the other characters. Now it's just Parappa in front of an orange background, which doesn't look too great considering Parappa's hat is also a shade of orange, so it makes the whole thing look a lot blander. Not long after that, the North American version of Parappa the Rapper got released. The North American version at its core is basically the same as the European version, it's just Parappa in front of a flat background with the title of the game at the top. But there are some noticeable differences. In the Japanese and European box arts, Parappa looks a bit different than his in-game model. His face is thinner and his ears are bigger than his in-game look. The North American release decided to use artwork of Parappa that looks more like his in-game model. There are things I like more about the North American version than the European version. Like, I think making Parappa's hat redder makes it pop more in front of the flat background. And I think it's neat that the way Parappa's feet are positioned on the border of the artwork kind of makes it look like he's standing on the edges of the PS1 case, almost like he's stuck in a box. However, I do like the more colorful title that the European version uses as opposed to the unpleasant yellowish green that the North American version uses. All in all, I think both the North American and the European versions pale in comparison to the lively Japanese version. Parappa the Rapper would get a direct sequel in 2001, simply titled Parappa the Rapper 2. Like the first game, Parappa 2's Japanese box art is again brimming with charm. You've got Parappa, his friends, and a ton of other items cluttered around on top of a white background. I just think it's a perfect blend of variety and simplicity, plus it stands out a lot. The European version is practically the same as the Japanese version, just with a different logo. I do prefer this version as I kind of like how they incorporated Parappa's hat into the logo here. The North American version again opted for a simpler looking design. It's Parappa doing a peace sign while standing on top of a bunch of PlayStation icons. It's fine, but I much prefer the European and Japanese box arts. A game that does have drastically different box arts across multiple regions is Dragon Ball Z Budokai, a 2002 PS2 fighting game based on the popular Japanese shonen manga and anime series, Dragon Ball, where the strange, childish young man Son Goku goes on various exciting adventures and battles the powerful foes that threaten Earth. Despite being based on a Japanese franchise, the game was actually first released in Europe. I think the European box art is pretty solid. You've got Goku with his power pole as the focus of the box art, with several other DBZ characters at the bottom of the box art, and the Eternal Dragon Shenron in the background. The only big problem I have with this box art is that several of the characters at the bottom of the box art, like the Great Saiyaman and Spopovich, are not actually in the game. Not long afterwards, the North American release would come out. This box art shows off Goku in his Super Saiyan form instead of his normal state, as well as Vegeta, Cell, Piccolo, and Gohan. I dig the red color scheme that the artwork is going for. It's really intense and in your face, which fits the DBZ franchise. Finally, the Japanese version was released a few months later, which wasn't even called Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Instead, it was just called Dragon Ball Z. It's nothing special admittedly, but I do like the contrast of Goku's glowing aura on top of the pitch black background. There's also some great use of shading on Goku to really make him look menacing. I think my favorite is either the North American version or the Japanese version. The next game in the series, Budokai 2, would be released in 2003. In Japan, the game is simply called Dragon Ball Z 2. Starting with the European box art, I gotta say this is a noticeable improvement over the first game. You've got Kid Buu creeping in the background at the top, in the middle you have the logo, and at the bottom you have Vegito, Goku, and Goku. Yeah, that's the only really big flaw I have with this box art. I don't know why they used Goku twice. It's super redundant. Otherwise, it's a dope cover. The North American box art is really cool too. Instead of using Goku twice, they opted to use Gotenks, which I think is a better choice. Again, they've got Buu menacingly laughing in the background, but this time Vegito is Super Saiyan and Goku is in his normal state. Finally, we have the Japanese version, which also decided to use Goku twice for some reason. Otherwise, this is a great cover. I like how the characters are all shooting an energy blast to the left, and you can even see the glow of the energy blast coming from the edge of the box art. I think my favorite is probably the European version. The next game, Budokai 3, called Dragon Ball Z 3 in Japan, released in 2004, and the European version of this box art is okay. They decided to use 3D models on the cover instead of the 2D artwork that we previously got, and I just don't think it hits the same. It is nice that we got some different characters on the cover, like Broly and Cooler though. The North American version has Goku punching you in the face, which I think is pretty striking. The Japanese box art is nothing all that interesting, just Goku and Vegeta facing off, although I do like the wavy, flaming kind of effect they have going on. My favorite is definitely the North American version. Another game with some interesting differences across several regions is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, a 2001 detective game about a rookie defense attorney trying to make a difference in the world by investigating crimes and pursuing the truth in various court cases. The game was originally released in Japan on the Game Boy Advance, but it would later get an updated version on the Nintendo DS in 2005, where it would then be localized to other regions. The Japanese DS box art is pretty cool. You've got images of several of the main characters at the top with the game's logo on the bottom. The North American version I think is a lot better though. You've got a much more dynamic action shot of Phoenix in the courtroom doing his signature objection point, with his assistant Maya backing him up. On the right side, you've got Phoenix's rival Miles Edgeworth looking smug as he towers over Phoenix. Oh, and you've also got the judge in the back there. I think this box art does a much better job at showing off the characters' personalities and what the game is about. The European version I think is the weakest of the three, but it's not a terrible cover. A simple image of Phoenix standing on top of a white background with the logo of the game in the middle. I think having a full body picture of Phoenix is cool, but I do wish there was a bit more going on here. The next game in the series, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All, released originally in 2002 in Japan on the GBA, and later on the DS in 2006. This box art uses the same style as the first game with 4 of the game's core characters at the top. I do prefer the way the first game looks though, only because compared to Justice for All's greenish gray background, the first game had a black background which not only created more contrast, but also it made a smooth transition between the background and the character portraits. Compare that to the Justice for All box art where you can visibly see the bottom of the character portraits because of the noticeable black bottoms. Starting with Justice for All, the North American and European box arts would stick to the format used by the Japanese box arts. The North American box art opted to use a white background at the bottom which fades into an orange background at the top. Like the Japanese box art of the first game, there's a nice gradient between the bottom of the character portraits and the white background at the bottom, which is more pleasing to the eyes than the abrupt cutoff of Justice for All's Japanese box art. The European box art is kind of a mix between the Japanese and North American ones. The bottom of the cover is white, but instead of fading into an orange background like the North American version, it uses a greenish gray background in the top half like the Japanese version. My favorite is the North American version. I could go into all of the really small, minute details that were changed, but like I mentioned before, the box arts were very similar from that point onward, starting with Justice for All. And that's all the box arts I want to talk about for today. If you're craving more videos about box art though, I've got a playlist of similar videos you can check out. That's all I've got to talk about for today though, so thanks for watching y'all, and have a great rest of your day.